So today's topic is it's the slogan "Girl Power." Now, I'm sure many of you have either heard that or come across it, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to explain it. So it is a slogan, and it's a slogan that feminists in the 90s it became popular, but it's definitely something that has stuck. And this idea is it's there in popular culture. It's there. You see it on stickers. You see it in you see it on memes. So I just wanted to really just dive into where did it come from, and then we're going to just look at what does it really mean. And then also, as Muslims, is it something that we should think, yeah, that's a good thing? We should put that hashtag girl power, or is that something that we should think is a good thing, really? That's one of the main things I want us to think about. So, so now we're going to go back into history. So I don't know how many of you remember the Spice Girls. Maybe you might have been, they were a band, an all-girl band, which was created in 1994. That was a long time ago. Now, the way I want to look at this is it's a bit like a case study, really. And now, if we the slogan "Girl Power," it's something that the Spice Girls became very famous for. And so let's just have a look. Who were the Spice Girls? Now, they were a group that were actually manufactured. They were created by two men called Bob and Chris Herbert. And what it was, these two men, they wanted to create a pop group that would rival the boy bands. So think of Westlife and Take That. So you had these really massive boy bands that were making loads of money. And so you had these two men who were in the pop industry, and they thought, okay, we need something different. And what could be good is an all-girl band. And it really was a vehicle to make money. Okay, so that was the first thing. And so you had these 5 members who they had auditions, and then they were chosen and they created this band. So that's the first thing to remember. So 2 men made this band. This is something that isn't mentioned that often, that the way that when you watch interviews about the Spice Girls, they kind of make out that they were friends and they were doing dancing together and different things, and it's like they created themselves, but that isn't true. Okay, that's number one thing to remember. So, and then after a few, I think it was a year or so, they dumped those 2 men, and they went with they signed a deal with someone else called Simon Fuller, and again he was a management team. And again, so you had a man who was in charge of an all-girl band. And the reason why I'm just emphasising this is that as I explain further on, it will make sense. And it kind of breaks down the myth of girl power and this idea of this independent, amazing group of women who, did this all by themselves. And it was very interesting when I was researching this. And one of the reasons why I was researching it was for the new book that I'm writing, which is called Why Are Muslim Women Losing Faith in Islam? And you might think, that's odd. What's the Spice Girls got to do with Muslim women losing faith? And again, I'll explain that as we go along. But it was really interesting. I ended up spending so much time reading it, researching this group. So now you have... So where did this idea come from? Now, prior to the Spice Girls, you had punk groups, girl-only punk groups. And they actually started off the idea of girl power, and it was girl punk. And punk generally, as a genre, it's this idea you're breaking barriers, you're disrupting, like the way that the punk bands, just think, they have spiky hair and they wear black or leather jackets, and they're singing about revolutionary things, not your average kind of, they don't sing about love songs, and they're very loud, they don't conform. So when you had these girl punk bands, they would talk about girl power. And so now when this group there was one of the main members, Jerry Halliwell, she then took this, she's the one who first started talking about girl power. And what she started saying in interviews is that we don't want to just have a pop band. We're not just a pop band. We are a movement. Yeah. And the movement is that we are, as girls and as women, we want our fans to know they understand their power and that they can do what they want. If they want to be, nothing, they can live life in their own terms. They can dress how they want. No one can tell them what to do. No one can tell if you want to have fun, you can have fun. If you want to be sexy, you can be sexy. And if you look at the whole image of this group, it was based on that these women are doing their own thing. Yeah. No one is telling them what to do. They dress how they want. If they want to be rude, if they want to, they're not like the other bands. They don't behave. And really, that is what they were saying by girl power. But what's interesting, when journalists would ask them, okay, can you kind of narrow that down a bit more? That sounds very general. That's a lot of things you've just said. And they would just say things like, oh no, you can't, it's just being positive. Yeah. There was nothing that would, if you'd say, okay, so does girl power mean that you don't need to have the men that are in charge of you? What about that? Isn't there a contradiction there? They wouldn't want to discuss that. They'd just say, oh, no, you're getting too serious. It's just let women have fun. Let girls have fun. So the first thing to note here is, and this is the thing with slogans and feminist slogans in particular, because they would say, we are feminists. And that we are, because they would say, that, well, of course we're feminists because we're encouraging women and young women in particular to live the way they want to. But the other thing that for anyone who can remember them, now the age that they were targeting, these are 20-year-old women, but they were targeting very young women, young girls. All the merchandising, if you think of, the bags, the clothes, the dolls, dolls are for kids. They're not for women. They're not for young women and teenagers. So their appeal was to young women and to young girls. So this was the message that they were giving to, and if you just Google a photo of them, you'll see the way that they were dressed was very provocative. It was very sexual. And but that was all seen, that is part of your power, yeah, that you can express your sexuality, that is your power as well. So they kept, and you'll see they'd constantly say this in interviews. This would be on the bag, all the merchandise that they were selling, it would be there. Now, so that's what would happen, that's what was done. Now let's just look at the reality of the idea that, okay, if women are in control of everything that they're doing and they can do whatever they want, how does that pan out in real life? Now, one of the things that, first thing to note here is that you'll see this a lot nowadays, that there's a very close connection between capitalism and feminism. That what has happened, and the Spice Girls are an example of this, that the acceptable version of feminism is when women, it's like they monetize their bodies and they monetize their sexuality. That is seen as absolutely okay. And feminism says, yes, that is absolutely fine for a woman to do that. And that's exactly what the Spice Girls did. And so to make money out of by objectifying yourself is completely acceptable. But now what I want you to think about is that what message does that give to young women? That what it's saying to them is that, okay, that you can, so objectifying yourself and then making money on top of that is okay. So if you want to, and no one, and this is the thing with girl power, no one has the right to tell you to not do that. So your parents don't have the right to tell you. For them, okay, in their position, it was their boyfriends. But then again, they're saying any man or even society should put no restriction on a woman. That is ultimately what it is. That's what was being told. Now, were they good role models for, for young girls? Now, it's a sad fact that they were talking about girl power, but unfortunately a number of them suffered from eating disorders. Jerry Halliwell, at one point she went down to 6 stones. Can you believe that? She was, I saw a picture, poor thing, she was skeletal. The other one that was called Sporty Spice, again, she did an interview and she said that she didn't have an eating disorder prior to joining the group, but then because of the they were so under the microscope and there was so much emphasis on their looks, and because they were wearing revealing clothing, she went bulimic, and she had a problem with her weight, and she still has it, she's never got over that, she said. And then again with Victoria Beckham, what's her name, Posh Spice, that was her name. Again, there was constant discussion about that she is too thin. She's way too thin. That's not normal. So again, I'd like you to just think that on the one hand, they were in the advertising and in the only word I can use is propaganda, is that they had a lot of power, but in reality, they had eating disorders, and at the time they said that we didn't need to talk about it because that wouldn't go with the image. Yeah, that wouldn't go with what they were selling. And another thing is that 2 of them had babies out of wedlock. Now, again, this would come under, well, they're free to do that if they want to. But again, what kind of role models is that for young women? And again, the whole eating disorder, this is the thing that when you monetize your body, you can't then stop the media when they, you've put yourself out there, and so you want the press to take pictures of you. You want to be, you're using your body to sell records. And then how do you stop the press from, you can't actually stop them. You can't say to them, no, actually, at this point, I want you to stop taking pictures of me. At this point, I want my privacy. At this point, I want you to stop, criticizing me and my relationships and putting my whole life under the microscope. You can't do that. And again, that's something that young girls who are aspiring to copy a group like Spice Girls, they don't realise that. They don't realise the mental pressure that puts them under. And they all talked about the different pressures they were under. And to the point where Jerry Halliwell then left because of that pressure. So now then the other thing, if we're talking about power and happiness and you're in control, when it comes to conforming to beauty standards, they didn't disrupt that at all. They just completely conformed. They did nothing new. They didn't, if we're thinking of girl power and female empowerment, not one of them was a normal weight. Not one of them, saying to women, oh, you can look however you want, but then conforming to this very strict standard of beauty that the beauty industry, that the fashion industry, the cosmetic industry gives to women. There was nothing new there. They weren't, I can't see how women's rights and any kind of equality as far as being content with the way you look, that's definitely not what was given, what they conformed to. If anything, if you look at they were all a pretty normal weight before they first joined. And even if you look, it's really obvious that some of them had plastic surgery done. So again, there is a myth there of girl power. To me, having power means you don't feel the need to conform. You're content with the way Allah has created you. You don't feel the need that I have to go on diets, or I have to starve myself, or I have to keep up with the constant fashion, the changes in fashion, and that staying relevant, or then how I won't be popular. Yeah, the idea of selling your body to make money, again, that doesn't sound like power to me. But that's what the slogan said. Right now, let's just take another example. Now, the idea, when we think of feminism, you think of, solidarity between women, that you support each other. That's something I would think would be encouraged. But unfortunately, when they did break up, when Jerry Halliwell left, it was really awful and nasty the way they turned on each other. And again, where was the, there's a famous line from one of their songs, friendship never ends, but it did. And it's really interesting, if for a young girl who was in the middle of, who loved them, and when their fans were totally nuts about them, she wouldn't understand. A 10-year-old would look at that, or even a 15-year-old. The facade was so good, the marketing was brilliant, and that she wouldn't be able to decipher any of the fact from fiction or the slogans from the truth. And she'd be thinking, but when you look at what they were actually, when you get older and you look back, and I wonder how many women even did that now, you then realise actually it wasn't a happy situation, and it wasn't something that I sold a lie. And that's why I'm talking about it now, because this is 25 years on now. And that, we're given, as women in particular, we're given slogans. So, for example, my body, my choice. I'm sure you guys can think of other ones that we're now given. And at the time, when you just hear it, you think, oh yeah, that sounds really good. And you don't sit and think about it. But in a way, I guess we're traveling back in time and thinking, well, that girl power is a slogan we were given. But actually, did it really, did it serve the goods? Did it really give us what we expected? And no, it didn't. And I think so we can learn a lesson from that, in that when we are given slogans, especially, and the thing is, it is especially by feminists, because they say feminism equals women's rights. And so this is why we really have to question what we are being fed and what we are being told. So, because we're constantly going to be given new ones, do what feels good. I just keep thinking of my body, my choice, because nowadays we now hear my hijab, my choice. Yeah, that's why I think it's quite pertinent for us Muslim women and we've embraced that completely. That we, instead of thinking hijab is obedience to Allah, which is, we only wear hijab because Allah tells us to. It's in the Quran, it's in the Sunnah. And so, but feminists have hijacked that and said, no, you don't wear hijab because of religiosity and obedience to your creator and you worship Allah. You do it because it's your choice, yeah? That's why you do it, and that's the only reason you should do it. And if you don't do it for that reason, then there's a problem. You need to question, yeah? So that's why these slogans that we're given, we have to think very carefully before we adopt them, before we start sharing them, before we start living by them. Okay, yeah, now this is the thing I found quite funny, and I see this nowadays a lot, and I wonder if you guys do as well, that when anyone would criticize the group for their behavior, for their anything really, they would just turn it around and they'd say, oh, right, you're only criticizing us because we're women. You're sexist. You can't take it that our all-women group is doing so well. You're jealous. You don't criticize male groups like that. You don't focus on their looks as much as you do us. And you just want to pull us down. That is the way they would answer anything. When they were criticized for why is your... are you appropriate role models for 6-year-olds? Yeah. Why there was, why your dolls are marketed to young children, and you're dressed very provocatively. Is that the message you're giving to a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old? Yeah. And then so the criticism was, instead of addressing the criticism, they would just say, oh no, you're being sexist, and that's not fair, and they'd play the victim card. And the thing is, you think that is such a cop-out. That if there is a valid criticism, you should have the guts and the intelligence and the honesty to address it, rather than just screaming sexism, which is what they used to do. So really to round up, really, because inshallah, I'd love to hear what you think. We'll have a short Q&A session, inshallah, because I wonder how many of you remember the Spice Girls. Did any of you used to listen to them? okay, you don't have to admit if you liked them. I would be embarrassed to do that as well. But I just remember when I used to work in a play group. This is like after school play group. And so I must have been about 18, 20. And I didn't used to, Spice Girls I think I missed that. But then I remember the young girls, and a lot of them were Muslim, because this was in London, it was in Whitechapel, just a lot of Bengali Muslims. I remember, you have to do different activities, you have to get painting and things like that. And then I remember there'd be a group of girls saying, oh yeah, we want to do dance. And I was like, okay, fine, if you want to do dance, I'm not going to dance with you, but if you want to dance, I can't stop you. And they would put the Spice Girls on, and they would do the moves. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is disgusting. Because I was thinking, this is so provocative, the way that your gestures, and I remember I'm thinking, I don't like this, and I'm not volunteering to be in charge of the dance session next time. But can you see how it was? They watch it, they copy it, they, inshallah, I know people are putting their hand up, but please, we will take questions later. But can you see the connection? I think, it's so, like I'm thinking of when, when I think of my boys, when they used to watch, when they'd watch action movies and cartoons, turn it off and they want to be those action they want to be the superheroes. So of course girls are watching that, and the videos, again, it does shock me how how like this was in 1994 to 10 years or so, how downhill things have gone. And I don't know what the pop groups are like now, but I've got a pretty good idea they've probably gone even worse. But so to round up really, so the whole idea of girl power, it really was a marketing device thought up for self-promotion and benefit by a group of women. Yeah, that is all it was. But what's interesting is how it took on a life of its own and how women have embraced it. And so I'm really asking you to think carefully about that. And it really was an excuse to behave selfishly, immorally, and individualistically. Yeah, that's what it turned into. And so I'd just like to, rather than taking on these shallow feminist slogans, as Muslims, we have something so much better. We have revelation. We have our hadith. We have our Quran. And I'm just going to mention a few, whereas like with any feminist idea, it's thought up by women who, based on their experiences, on what they want, they come up with this idea. So just as an example, another example is the home is a comfortable concentration camp. That was by Betty Friedan in her book, The Beauty Myth. But that has, it's interesting. Women may not know that slogan, but they've definitely internalized it in their minds. Another one is that, this is by Mary Wollstonecraft, she was around in the 18th century, that she said, marriage is like, legalized prostitution. Yeah. Now, again, women may not know that slogan, but they, they've started to believe in it. Yeah. So what's the alternative, isn't it? So, inshallah, I'd like to read out a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he said, "The most complete of believers in faith are those with the best character, and the best of you are the best in behavior to their women." So that's a hadith about how women should be treated by Muslims. The best to their women. Aisha reported, may Allah be pleased with her, that the Prophet ﷺ said, "The best of you are the best to their families, and I am the best to my family." I would take these hadith any day over in these shallow slogans that we're given. There's also the hadith, and I'm paraphrasing, that Jannah is at the feet of your mother. Again, that gives respect, and power to women rather than the nonsense that they were peddling. And the Prophet ﷺ also said, the world is enjoyment, and the best enjoyment in the world is a righteous wife. Okay, so what I would, it's so beautiful that when you compare the way that our Creator speaks about women and the way our Prophet ﷺ speaks about women, it is so much more respectful. It genuinely gives women rights. It does, stuff like it never sexualizes women. It never turns them, it never commodifies them. And it also tells women that we should raise ourselves to a higher standard. Yeah, that what these women did was, it's like they lowered themselves, and they realized that the way to make money is that we will is to sell ourselves. That's the way I see that. And the slogan "Girl Power" was just another way, an opportunistic way to sell themselves and to make money out of their fans. So alhamdulillah, we need to be way more intelligent and look out for these things, inshallah. Mainstream media outlets do not cater for the needs of you as a Muslim. There are topics which they will completely ignore. For example, the hijab ban that is happening in India, the Islamophobia that Muslim women all over in the West are facing. They don't even report Palestine or Syria in a balanced manner. So through my podcast and my YouTube channel, I discuss the topics specifically related to Muslim women that particular mainstream popular culture will not discuss. Topics like critiquing feminism, topics such as number of hijab bans, niqab bans that are happening in India, in France, in Canada. These are challenges that Muslim women are facing, and I'm going to keep continuing to shine a light on these topics. So inshallah, I would love your help and support in continuing to create this content for Muslim women, which is challenging the very negative Islamophobic narrative that we are being given. I think as a Muslim creator, we should be producing content that is Islamic, that is well researched, and provides hope to Muslim women and men that as Muslims, when we see an evil, we can change it with our hand, we can speak about it, or we can hate it in our heart. And I think some of us are able to create videos and podcasts, and others who are not able to do that, like yourself, you can support that work as well and gain in the reward, inshallah, by contributing and supporting to my Patreon page. The link is in the description below. Inshallah, may Allah reward you, and please do dua for all the Muslims around the world that we can continue to challenge this Islamophobic narrative, but always remember that Allah is with the right